Thank you for listening to the very best in modern praise and worship. My name is Tony Hammock. I'm here in the studio with some guests from the Centers of Americans for Prosperity. Did I get the name right?
Yes.
And we have Barley Riggs and Phoebe Pierpoint here with us, along with Charlie Fuquay, the king of controversy. And we want to introduce our listeners to the ideas and the concepts behind Americans for Prosperity. It's I think a conservative organization that has got an ideology that really jives with how I think, and so I wanted to give them some time to share with us some of their thoughts on what's going on.
Well, thank you, Tony. We're really happy to be here. And what we're trying to do is, in the past, AFP has been a very small presence in Arkansas, and just recently we have begun expanding, and we've hired on a bunch of folks. And two of them are in the Batesville area, so we're really excited to be increasing our presence. In the past, we've done things like the gas event down by the river, and we're wanting to do more of those kind of events.
Now, refresh our memory on that. What is the gas event?
Sure. So what we did was we reduced the gas prices down to what they were before Obama took office, to make an impact with people on how much the gas prices have gone up.
So the Americans for Prosperity paid the difference?
We did.
They did?
Yes,
okay.
We did.
Wow, that's pretty nice.
We did that all over the nation, so.
Wow. I know, I listen to an economist named Peter Schiff, and he's an Austrian. You guys, by your facial expressions, I can tell you've heard of Peter Schiff, but he came on MSNBC one night, and he said, gas prices have never been cheaper.
That's
and
true.
All the other talking heads were going crazy. What are you saying, Peter? What do you mean? He says, well, if you buy gas today with silver, it's never been cheaper. Because silver was also, all the commodities were going up because of the quantitative easing. That was his point that he was trying to make. You know, we were devaluing the dollar. But anyway, that's really cool. So obviously socialism doesn't work anywhere in the world. I don't know why we think it should work here, but hey, let's try it again, you know. I don't know. I'm not really a socialist. I think it's an evil, but anyway.
Well, that's why organizations like AFP are so important, to tell people what really is going on and let them know what their politicians are doing and up to, and give them bring the politics to the people, so to say. We're all hardworking people. We have jobs. We have lives. A lot of times we don't have the time to keep up with what all is going on, and things are done, you know, on the sly without us even knowing about it. So that's really the purpose of Americans for Prosperity.
Can you just give us some detail? Who are you exactly?
Sure. We are a grassroots organization, so we're built of people like you, people like me. We currently have around 77,000 members in Arkansas. So really, what we are is the voice of the people. And we believe that the bigger voice that people have, the less they can get away with in Washington, D.C. And so we really just empower people to speak out about the
Okay,
issues.
you say you have members. Is there a membership dues, or how do you do that?
I'm a member.
Becoming a member just requires signing up on our website. We send out maybe one weekly email, and then we send out emails about upcoming events. And then we also have a new program called the Champions of Prosperity, which is a $25 yearly membership. And that just gives you access to speakers before they speak, so maybe a special reception with that speaker, or discounts at other events, just special privileges and benefits for people that want to be a champion of prosperity.
Okay, well, the things you do, paying for gas, whatnot, obviously cost money. Where does your funding come from?
Sure, good question. So we have 90,000 donors across the U.S. We are in, I think, 33 states now, and currently expanding into, I think, 3 or 4 more within the coming months. And so we have all kinds of donors all over the U.S., but most of it comes from people like you and me giving $5 or $10 or $20 here and there.
Okay. Are the Hunt brothers in any way involved with Americans for Prosperity? I've heard that.
The Hunt brothers?
You know who the Hunt brothers are?
Yeah. You okay.
Didn't they try to corner the silver market in the 70s?
Okay. Okay. And your goals are?
Our goals are to create a better life for Arkansans and people all over across the nation. So our main issues here in Arkansas are improving education, reducing the size and scope of government, reducing taxes. We have the highest taxes in the region. So we just really want to create a better environment for Arkansans.
Just because it's a big issue, do you take a stand on Obamacare or the private option?
We do. So one of our big things that we have going on right now is talking about Mark Pryor's vote on Obamacare. And we believe that Obamacare is very bad for Arkansans. There's 42,000 people in Arkansas who have received pending cancellation notices about their insurance. It has destroyed jobs, it's cut hours. We believe that Mark Pryor, being a representative of Arkansas, should understand how it affects Arkansans.
Okay, and the private option.
As well, we do not support, and we put up a really big fight when that was first proposed, and unfortunately it's still in effect today.
Okay. Methods. What do you do exactly?
So what we do is we educate. That's our C3 side. And then on our C4 side, we mobilize people to talk to their friends and neighbors. So, for example, we'll be having a phone bank tonight at Lyons College, room 23, and we'll be picking up the phone and calling our friends and neighbors and saying, hey, how do you feel about this issue? How do you feel about that issue? And just really getting a feel for what people are facing, what people are dealing with, so that we can better serve the people of Batesville.
You know, another big issue that I think is coming up right away in Arkansas is there's an attempt to try and do away with or at least extend term limits. Do you take a position on that?
That's an issue that we haven't focused on. So what we're really focused on right now is Obamacare and the private option. That's not to say that's not something AFP would get involved in at some point, but that isn't an issue we're currently working on.
Do you ever in any way endorse or support particular candidates for office?
Great question. We do not. So we support policies, and we stick to our principles. Our candidates will come and go. So we stick to our policies that we support and that we believe are best for the people.
Well, now, it seems like I remember you doing a series of mailers for particular candidates that you did in the last election.
And those mailers were about the policies that those candidates supported or didn't support. So, for example, we have dropped a mailer on Mark Pryor's vote on Obamacare. So we don't focus on necessarily other issues that Mark Pryor talked about, supported or didn't support, but in our case, we are focusing on Obamacare, and anyone that supported Obamacare, we believe is not good for Arkansas.
Well, now, in this particular county, I believe your organization did a mail-out supporting the candidate that had voted for Obamacare in the state legislature 4 times, and you still sent out a mail-out supporting him. Help me understand that.
Sure. So we weren't supporting the candidate. We were under the impression that he was going to vote against Obamacare.
Now he hasn't done that, has he?
No, unfortunately no. And a lot of times, and that's where I say, candidates will let us down. Candidates will say one thing and do another. And in that case, we will inform the voters on what happened there. And so maybe we'll drop a mail piece highlighting the fact that he lied to Arkansans. So that's something that
I've never heard of a politician lying to voters.
I know
before.
it's very rare,
Never
but
happened.
in the case that it happens, we're all over it.
You're the watchdog for that.
Do you know how that, because we're talking about a liberal Democrat who even sent out flyers on his own saying that he backed all of BB's policies. Okay, so how's it happen that a guy like that gets supported by your organization?
Again, we don't support him. We support his vote. If he was going to say that he wasn't voting on Obamacare, then we will support that, and we will thank him for not voting for Obamacare, because we are focused on the issues. We aren't focused on the candidates. And so that's really what we're here to do, is educate Arkansans, educate the people of Batesville on what is going on in the legislature, what policies are being proposed.
So you deal with both state and federal issues?
We do.
Okay. Just question, where do you stand on the national debt? What's your position on that?
Well, we believe it's completely out of control. That's that's a big focus of AFP. That one thing that we had talked about recently was the amount of money that was spent to build a footbridge in Little Rock, $1.2 million, while we have bridges that are not in good condition, that are crumbling, that need to be reinforced, and yet here we are spending money on a footbridge, $1.2 million.
Are you talking about the Big Dam Bridge?
No, actually that's a different bridge.
Okay.
That's a great name for that bridge.
Well, that's what they call it. It crosses the big dam.
It does. Very descriptive. And another issue in particular, that money was, we believe, wrongfully allocated or wasteful spending. We paid 12, I think, people from Arkansas to attend a climate change conference in Copenhagen. So it's just, the government is just rife with waste. We believe that we need to cut out those areas of waste, reduce the spending, reduce the budget, and make sure money's going where it should be.
You just brought up another issue. So what's your organization's stand on climate change?
We actually don't take a stand on climate change in particular.
Okay.
We live in Arkansas. It changes about every 10 minutes.
And it's been quite the climate change in the past few weeks. But yeah, there are a lot of great organizations that focus on issues regarding climate change, and AOP is not one of them. We focus on government spending and taxes and fiscal issues.
Okay, so dealing with that, do you take any kind of stand on the Federal Reserve?
No, we don't. That's not a focus area of AOP.
Okay. I got to question that because the Federal Reserve and fiscal issues are kind of tied together, aren't they?
Sure, there are a lot of fiscal issues, and unfortunately we have to pare down which areas we decide to focus on. So what we try to do is attack the root of the problem, which we believe is a general encroachment of the government. And so that's the area that we decided that we were most helpful in attacking and trying to fix.
So you're interested basically in cutting government spending. Would that be accurate?
Yes, cutting the size and scope of government and just making it easier for people to do business in Arkansas.
Okay. Do you take a stand on Islam at all?
We do not, no.
Okay.
We don't do any religious or social issues.
Okay. Okay, that kind of covers my questions. Do you have any?
Well, I know they have some other material they want to cover with us before they go, and they're in a little bit of a time crunch. But I also wanted to bring up the possibility of David Barton coming into the community and let him talk a little bit about that. And any other closing remarks that you've got?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Tony. So we're going to be doing a tour of the state with David Barton. We're really excited about bringing him here. He's going to be doing an event up here in Northeast Arkansas. The locations are not entirely pat down yet, but there will be an event in Northeast Arkansas, and we'll be getting the word out about that event as soon as we get the details. It'll be May 29th is when he'll be here, so we're really excited to talk about that. We also will be doing a lot of meetings and events. So, for example, we have what's called Prosperity Alliance meetings, and the purpose of these meetings is to form a coalition of conservatives so that we can raise our grassroots presence out here in the Northeast corner. So we haven't had a lot of presence in the past, and that's why we have hired Barley Riggs onto the team, and I'm really excited to have Barley up here. He's going to be organizing the events that we're going to be doing up here, and if anyone is interested in getting involved with AFP, they can reach out to Barley directly by phone. His phone number is 870-613-4604, and just give him a call if you're interested in attending our phone bank tonight, if you're interested in getting involved with the Prosperity Alliance meetings, as well as future meetings up here.
Okay, and then nationally and locally, there's a Americans for Prosperity website. What's that web address?
Yes. AmericansForProsperity.org/Arkansas.
Okay.
Or you can go to, I can't remember. I'm sorry, the name escapes me actually. But everything is on our website if you want to go to AmericansForProsperity.org.
And then from there they can navigate to Arkansas or check it out and see what they think.
Yes.
I like the name Americans for Prosperity. I don't think there are too many Americans for poverty. I'm an American for poverty. So obviously, I guess it's the ideology or the agenda or the pathway to prosperity. I personally believe is very similar to what you're saying, which is smaller government, more liberty, more freedom. Get the regulations off of people and let them work, and let them achieve, let them dream, let them build, and reduce their taxes so they're free to be free. That's America, right? Land of the free and home of the brave. So Anyway, do you guys have any closing remarks? Anything you want to say before you head out? Now, you guys are headed over to WRD Entertainment, right? Here at 10:15.
We are.
So if you want to pick up again on the Americans for Prosperity, I guess you're probably going to be on 103.3 and then the Rock
10:15.
at 10:15. Yeah. So if you didn't hear what you wanted to hear, go check them out over there on the other end of the spectrum. But man, it's great having you guys come in, and we bless you. We wish you all the best, and excited about working with you all in the future. Charlie, you got anything?
Thank you so much, Tony.
All right,
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
and we hope
you're
to
welcome.
see people out tonight at our phone bank at Lions College.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Well, that was pretty cool. Americans for Prosperity. And I'm an American for Prosperity.
I think they've got to sneak out.
You guys go ahead and sneak out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate it.
We'll see you
Thanks,
all.
Charlie. It was great to meet you.
Catch you later, Barley.
Okay.
Water.
You got a whirlwind tour, man. These guys are rushing through Batesville, taking care of living the dream, and Americans for Prosperity. Now, Charlie, you didn't say it. You didn't come right out and say it, but you're kind of fishing for some information
Well,
because
you know, the candidate they supported
your opponent,
was
yeah.
my opponent.
Yeah, in the political race here for the state
And
legislature.
what she said was accurate. They thought he was going to take a particular stand, probably because he told them that.
Yeah.
And he lied to them because he has taken the opposite stand all along. Now, I guess I think they should have known that because there were 4 votes on Obamacare before he knew he had an opponent. And I'm talking about James McClain.
Yeah.
And he voted for Obamacare and funding it in Arkansas in all 4 of those votes. When he found out he had an opponent, that was me, in the next and last vote, when the vote came up, he got up and walked out of the room and didn't vote at all. And so then he said, well, I've decided I'm opposed to it. Well, he had been for it in every vote prior to finding out he had an opponent.
Yeah.
And when he found out he had an opponent that was definitely opposed to Obamacare, he switched his tune until he got elected.
Yeah.
Okay, now it's important to note that his term is up for state rep.
Right.
And now he is running for state senate.
Okay.
And he is running against Linda Collins Smith, a person who was a Democrat and changed parties while in office because she said she just couldn't stomach what the Democrats were asking her to do. And it really wasn't Obamacare that switched her, although she was opposed to Obamacare all along. It was that they demanded that she support abortion. And she just said, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
And so basically she left the party, but they were throwing her out anyway because she wouldn't support abortion. And you know, I think that's important for people to understand. If you are a Democrat or if you ever vote for a Democrat, you are supporting abortion.
You know, I kind of look at things that way too, but I'm going to just, for sake of argument, just come up with what other people might think or say is, well, yeah, Charlie, but I'm a pro-life Democrat.
Well, you know what? I heard that as I went door-to-door campaigning. I can't tell you how many hundreds of times I heard that.
Yeah.
But it's not possible.
When it's not possible because the National Democratic Party is pro-choice.
Right.
And so, because they're pro-choice, they're creating a system of exterminating unborn babies.
Right.
Which is what pro-choice means. You know?
And if you support any Democrat in any race at any level, you're supporting abortion because that's their policy and that's their platform.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't know how else you look at it. You know, and mainly it's older people that say, well, I'm a pro-life Democrat. And it's just, well, I've been a Democrat all my life, and they're not willing to admit that the Democratic Party of their fathers and grandfathers is not the Democratic Party of today.
Yeah, the social issues and the fiscal issues. I know a lot of people. It's really interesting because I know a lot of folks, and I know on these political issues, you know, like we like to joke around about you being, the king of controversy, me being the pragmatic polarizer. Obviously, these issues are very polarizing, and so, but I hate to be so simple, but I'm going to be very simple. You know, if your guy is for killing babies, I'm not for that guy.
Yeah.
I keep it simple.
And if your guy is running on the Democratic platform, He's for killing babies.
Well, I mean, I think, it's, you would, if you ask me, are you for killing babies? Well, heck no, I'm not for killing babies. Of course not. But I think at the end, that's what's happening. I mean, and that's the Supreme Court justices that are in the at the federal level in the Supreme Court. They voted on Roe v. Wade. I don't know if that ever comes up for a vote again. I know Rand Paul had put a bill on to define when life begins and to define the beginning of life at conception, because I think in Roe v. Wade,
I think they made reference to it.
We don't really know when life begins.
Yeah,
and so
which was at that time was biologically incorrect.
Right.
I mean, I know the Supreme Court are lawyers and not scientists, but any high school biology student ought to be able to know when life begins.
Yeah, anyone that's had any, what's that, embryology.
Yeah, it begins at conception.
A unique human life begins at conception. I had a professor in college that made the argument that life begins before conception. And he was just trying to muddy the water. He's being a little smarty pants, but, yeah, technically in some senses of the word it does, but an individual unique human life does not begin before conception. It begins at conception. So, but anyway, I really believe that it seems to me, and again, my perspective, I don't see all things and know all things, but it seems to me that it wouldn't hurt my feelings if the federal government got a little bit smaller.
Oh yeah.
And
I'm going to address that too. There's a guy running for governor. His name's Curtis Coleman. Okay. I don't want to say his whole platform, but the major issue on his platform is the federal government's gotten too big and too powerful, and the states have to start pushing back.
yeah.
And our problems are not going to be solved by the federal government. The federal government is the problem. It doesn't solve problems, it is the problem. And the states are just going to have to stand up and say, we're not going there.
We're not going there. We're not going to do that.
And I guess you think, well, that's kind of what caused the Civil War. And it is.
Yeah, the states' rights issue.
The states' rights issue. And I don't want to say I'm for slavery. I'm not. Slavery was a horrible institution.
Right.
But I think, had I been around at that time, I would have fought for the South. I think there were people that fought for the South that were opposed to slavery, because there was a far bigger issue, and that is the federal government, or should the federal government be all powerful? And it's ironic that the parties have almost taken a complete switch. It was basically the Democratic Party that was for slavery. I mean, that's just the way it was. And the Republican Party was organized to oppose slavery. That's what the Republican Party was all about. And now the Republican Party, of the two, is more prone to saying we want states' rights, and the Democratic Party says, no, we want the federal government to be all powerful. It's like there's been a flip-flop.
Yeah, that's interesting how all that happens. Well, I kind of peeked over here at your notes, and I don't want to get ahead so much, but you're wanting to talk a little bit today about land grab.
Yeah.
And what's going on with the federal government land grab?
Okay, yeah, you have definitely peeked at my notes.
Yeah.
Okay, this whole thing with Cliven Bundy.
Yes.
Okay.
The guy in Nevada,
And
the cattle rancher.
And that is just the tip of the iceberg. What is this really all about? It's all about Agenda 21.
No, it's about the desert tortoise.
Yeah, okay, yeah. No, it isn't. It's about Agenda 21. And I think many of our listeners probably know what Agenda 21 is. It is if you don't know what Agenda 21 is, it is the overarching principle and goal of the UN. And what does it involve? It involves an 80% reduction in the population of the world, and all people living in human corridors, basically cities, and most of the world left to go wild. And that's what they're striving for, because that's, quote, sustainable.
Sustainable development is
Right.
another term that Agenda
Absolutely.
21 gets kind of
And
under the radar.
Yeah. Agenda 21 goes on for pages and pages. Some of our listeners may remember the Blue Ways thing that came.
Yeah, I remember that.
Okay, that was part of Agenda 21.
And our local guys really stood up.
Oh, they were against it?
Yeah.
But people need to wake up and understand that it's not just this one attack. It's one attack.
That's relentless.
It's
Yeah.
relentless. And they haven't given up on the Blue
no.
Ways. It's
No.
not over.
Yeah, they'll skin that cat a different way.
Yeah.
You know, I know even in the areas of gun control, you know, what is it, the Second Amendment that gives us the right to keep and bear arms. Supposedly there are, what do you call it, national treaties, international treaties that circumvent national law. And so there have been talk of forming these treaties with the UN to get gun control into the United States, where it circumvents the Second Amendment. Now, you've got to convince the American people to do that, which I don't think is going to happen. But anyway, I mean, there are, you know, we just gave away control of the internet, didn't we?
Well, I don't know that that's happened yet. But you know, gosh, talk about a big issue. We're talking about giving control of the internet to the UN.
Yeah, right.
Okay? Now, today, the main power in the UN is a coalition of Islamic nations.
Yeah.
So if the UN is controlling the internet is controlled by a coalition of Islamic nations. Now, Islam teaches that any insult of Islam or any derogatory statement about Allah or Muhammad should result in the death penalty.
Punishable by death.
Punishable by death. Well, now, how do you turn the greatest freedom of speech the world has ever seen, the internet, over to someone who says there should be no freedom of speech, and if you try to exercise it, we will kill you?
But it's a religion of peace, Charles.
Yeah, I know that. But I mean, that's where we are. And you know, so many people don't even realize what's going on with that.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, okay, so back to this Agenda 21 and the Cliven Bundy thing. Now, I heard two different stories about the real reason that the federal government wanted the land. One was Harry Reid's son was in some kind of business venture to establish
with the Chinese.
some kind of solar panel array
Yeah.
or some kind of solar electricity generating system, and they wanted that land.
And,
for that
and that may
purpose.
be true.
And then the other thing that I heard, now this was a rumor I heard from a pastor friend of mine, that he heard from a real estate agent that the government's been trying to get this land for years because there are rich uranium deposits there in Nevada under the soil. And so by running these people off, they can get what they really want, which isn't to protect the desert tortoise.
No.
Although that really.
But now
makes me
think about
feel
that.
right here.
If there's uranium deposits there,
And maybe from all the nuclear detonations.
yeah,
that they
why
set
does
up, I
that
think.
need to be government land? You know, if private individuals own that land and the uranium's mined, the private individuals that own the land get the profits from it. I mean, isn't that the way our system works?
Yeah, it
It's
should.
supposed to, but what can you do? You can steal the land from the people.
Now the land that the Bundys are on isn't even their land, though.
No, but it's not federal land.
What is it?
It
belong to Nevada?
it belongs to the state. Yeah.
So it's like
but-
a state park. Or
Yeah,
something?
here's, as I understand it, here's what, it's not a park, okay? As I understand it, here's what it was. It was state land, and there was open grazing on it. And the Federal Bureau of Land Management said, hey, if you'll pay us a fee, we'll help manage that land and make sure things are ordered. So, you know, the ranchers said, oh yeah, let's let the federal government in there to help us manage this and we'll all be better off, okay?
Yeah,
But somehow the federal government didn't keep their promise.
really.
And basically the fees that the ranchers were paying were used to cut off the ranchers' rights to the land. And if you really understand the complete history and the lies that were told about this, you understand what Cliven Bundy is so upset about. It's not his land, okay, but it's not federal land.
Right.
But they want it to be federal land. You know, let's face it, what do they want? They want all land to be federal land. That's really what Agenda 21 calls for. So it can be managed for our benefit.
Yeah, and it's the idea that there are too many people on the planet, and we're ruining the environment, we're ruining the atmosphere, we're destroying the earth, and so we need to begin to whittle away at the human population and concentrate people into cities, and like you said earlier, let large swaths of land go wild, and all that. And I'm for the environment. I mean, who doesn't, who wants their kids to drink mud? Who wants their kids to glow? Nobody does.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that.
But let me tell you what's really going on here. Okay,
What's really going on?
I think anybody that
Let's cut to it here.
knows that the political picture of at least the West, Europe and the United States, is controlled by the Rothschild banking family. And they're greedy and they're selfish, and they don't want to share the world with anybody else. They want as many people killed and gone from the earth as possible so there's more for them. That's really what it's all about.
Isn't there a magic number of people they do want to keep around?
Oh yeah, they need slaves, they need servants.
500,000.
Sure, yeah, but they don't need all of us to serve them.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, there's some recent information out that they say, robots or equipment, can basically do a lot of things that people are doing.
Are we just useless eaters?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah,
And those of us that they need, they consider human cattle. We're just livestock to serve them. That's really their attitude, and we need to wake up and understand that that's their attitude.
Yeah, I think to take a look into the Federal Reserve, I was a little bit disappointed with the American Center for Prosperity, or American for Prosperity, in their, and maybe our guest didn't perfectly represent every nuance and everything that they feel about the Federal Reserve, but when you want to go to the source of the problem and you really want to dig down and see what's really going on, I think that's a really good place to start turning rocks over and seeing what you find.
Wait, stop and think about this. The Federal Reserve is the second most powerful financial entity on earth. The only one more would be the IMF, the International Monetary Fund.
Yeah.
And the Federal Reserve has been around for 100 years, and it has never been audited. I just want you to put that in your mind and rattle it around.
Yeah.
Ron Paul for maybe 30 years has had a bill asking for the Federal Reserve to be audited. He's never gotten that passed. Now, if that's not passed, I ask you, who controls our politicians?
Yeah. Well, I think everyone gets the whole concept of, hey, we're going to support your campaign. We're going to give you $20 million or $1 million or $500,000. And when you become elected, we really would like it if you would pass a law that allows solar panels to be a big tax deduction, so we don't have to pay any corporate income tax next year because we work on solar panels.
Yeah.
These kinds of you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back kind of things that are going on. But I think they're going on at multiple levels. I don't think it's just at this national or local politician with a national or local corporation. I think it's going on at the very highest level.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's a lot of people. People are. If people aren't principled, people are corruptible. And a lot of times, we've talked about, people changing this and changing that. They feel this way. Okay, now I feel this way. Well, sometimes you can see the light. You can come to an epiphany that, hey, I was wrong. But then other times you can put your finger on the pulse of the focus group and say, what do the people want? Oh, the people don't want this anymore? Well, I've changed my mind. I don't want it anymore either. Well, really, what that person, I think, is saying is, my principles aren't nearly as important as my electability. I want to be reelected, and I don't really care what I have to say or do to be reelected. So if by being a good guy gets me reelected, or by being this kind of guy gets me reelected, I don't care. I'm going to image myself in the image that I think the people want to see.
And here's how this is justified. Well, I'm a really good guy, and if I'm not elected, I can't do any good. So I need to compromise to get elected so I can do good. And that's the path they go down. Let me tell you a story. When I was campaigning, I ran into a lady and I gave her my literature. And she said, I'm sick of politicians telling me what they are going to do and then going and doing whatever they want to do rather than what I want them to do. I want to know, will you do what I want you to do? And I told her, absolutely not. I'm not going to do what you want me to do. That's not why I'm going there. That's not my intention. My intention is to follow my convictions and do what I believe is right. Now, here's my literature. It tells you what my convictions are. I'm giving you my promise. I will be true to those convictions. If you like that, vote for me. If you don't, vote against me. Because there are, and I'm trying to remember the numbers, I think 9,000 voters in this district, I'm going to say. Now, how do I do what all 9,000 of those want me to do?
Yeah,
I can't. All I can do is do what I believe is right, to let my convictions guide me. And that's not who we're electing. We're electing people that do just what you said. They stick their finger up in the wind and see which way the wind's blowing. Right. Or more importantly, and see who's making political contributions. And, let's face it, if you got lots of money flowing into your campaign, you can make a lot of TV ads and whatnot, and you can mislead the voters to believe whatever you want them to believe. Right. It's often the person that has the most money to spend that gets elected. I mean, that's the driving principle.
Let me throw out an idea, and I don't know that I'm for it necessarily, but I do want to just kick it out there. We've got salary caps in athletics, because obviously, one team, if they've got unlimited resources, can outspend the other teams, draft all the best players, and dominate the league for years. And the fans probably don't really want that. It seems like the fans kind of want a close game. If you had one professional team for the next 10 years that won every game, I mean, golly, that'd be, here they go again, So, what about the concept of saying there's a spending cap on your campaign, that once you reach a certain amount of money, okay, that's it. We're going to have kind of a free market system because it is semi-competitive, and there is a certain amount of spending, but once you get to this level, that's it. In that way, in some ways, it makes it not about how bad you can make the other guy look, but it makes it about how the substance of the substance of the candidates themselves. And I know I've been watching some of the, I guess it's Tom Cotton has been running an ad, and he's imaging himself as a soldier and a good guy, and he's following orders, and it's a lighthearted ad, and I forgot who his opponent is, but his opponent's like
it's Mark Pryor.
Yeah, his opponent's like Tom Cotton's a dirty dog.
Yeah.
He puts out this ad,
And Mark Pryor images himself as a fine Christian man who supports murdering babies.
Yeah. So, again, it's politics, and I think people need to understand that. So, but did people really take the time to understand that? Did they really look through all that?
I don't think most people do. I think most people vote for the candidate who has aired the most ads.
Who's got the coolest ads?
Yeah. I think that's what it boils down
to.
Marketing. We're very simple. At least the majority of us are. So, and you talked about that limit. Let me tell you what has stood in the way of any kind of limit on spending, and it is that the courts have held that that's a limit on free speech. And the most important free speech, which is political speech. Now, here's what I suggest, although what I suggest would be outlawed by the courts as well. And that is, I don't believe any organization, corporation, labor union, I think PACs, I don't think anybody but individuals should be allowed to make political contributions. And I think there should be a limit on what each individual can give.
I see.
Now, I don't think the courts would tolerate that either. But I think that's the problem. I think we have these political action committees and all these other organizations.
Well, what you're proposing, though, makes a lot of sense, because I think what we see is that the corporations, and I'm not against corporations, but the corporations support the candidate, and so what do the candidates care about? The people?
Or the corporations?
They care less about the people because they're not getting any money from the people. But if the funding stream, as you're suggesting, were to come grassroots from the people, now the candidates have got to think, hey, I've got to do what I said I was going to do for the people. I've got to stand on these principles that I ran on and do that. It's an interesting proposal. It does seem to incentivize the politicians in the way they should be incentivized in, which would be, again, to represent the people, which is what they're supposed to be doing. But as we've already discussed, it seems like it's very feasible and reasonable to think that a person that got $1.5 million from a corporation is going to be incredibly concerned about what that corporation thinks about their political life.
And really, what's really opened the door for obscene political spending is
Super PACs.
McCain-Feingold, which created this super PAC and all this kind of thing. So they're not really part of the candidate's campaign committee, but it's basically unlimited how much individuals and corporations can give to advertise for that candidate or against their opponent.
Yeah.
And that's what's really corrupted our political. And it was intended to clean everything up, but it made everything worse. That's the biggest problem, is the PACs. PACs shouldn't be allowed at all. There should be spending on issues by particular groups, but not for candidates. Now, that's a fine line. You understand what I'm saying? Well, this candidate supports this issue. And I'm not sure I know how to deal with all that. But we've got too much money going into the political process, because that's what determines the outcome. I want to move back to something we got way off of. And that's, we were talking about the Bureau of Land Management and Agenda 21, and them wanting to grab basically all the property they can. The next target is about 90,000 acres, mainly within Texas, right along the Texas-Oklahoma border. And that's what they want to make federal property. And Rick Perry has really taken a stand against that. And I don't know if you follow Rick Perry very
Not
well.
a lot.
Well, I'm more and more I'm becoming a real Rick Perry fan.
Yeah.
But he's one of these governors that's standing up against the federal government and saying, you're not going to do that, not in Texas. And Rick Perry has even threatened secession. And I guess I feel like if Texas goes, Arkansas ought to go with them, and probably every other state except for maybe Illinois, California, and New York. But anyway, they're trying to grab this land in Texas, and the Attorney General in Texas has written a letter to the Bureau of Land Management, basically saying if you try to take Texas land, there's going to be action taken. And basically threatening a lawsuit, and the governor stands completely behind the Attorney General in that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think in general, some people want a nanny state. Some people want the federal government to take care of them. I don't personally want that. I don't want the government to take care of me. I want the government to let me create, let me build. And I think that's the foundation of one of the principles that makes our country what it is. And it's one of the things that makes other countries around the world want to be like the United States, is the liberty and the freedom that we have. And the more you give, the more you tax people, the more you take away their incentive to work, and you redistribute that wealth. You can't make poor people rich by taking money from rich people and giving it to them. It just doesn't work.
Another question I asked the folks from Americans for Prosperity is, do you take a stand on Islam? And, oh no, we don't get involved in religious issues. And anybody that's listening to this show knows that my two biggest issues are the Federal Reserve and Islam, because I believe they're the biggest threats to America.
Well, let me jump in real quick, because Islam is more than just a religion.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a complete way of life.
It's a political
system,
yes.
political ideology. It's a religion. It's an economic system. It's a legal system. It's really, from the cradle to the grave, an entire system of living and thinking. So to kind of not take a stand on Islam, we think of, we compartmentalize everything in the States. We've got our religious box, we've got our work box, we got our home box, we got all this, but in the Islamic world, it's all one big box. Everything's all together.
Well, really, I've got one big box, and that's, I'm a Christian, and I believe I'm supposed to oppose evil. I believe that's my Christian duty, to oppose evil.
Right.
And fractional reserve banking is evil. It's a violation of God's law, and it concentrates wealth in the hands of very few people and makes everyone else debt slaves. And I believe God's word condemns it. And what about Islam? Islam, I believe, is the greatest evil the world has ever seen. I don't think there's anything to compare to it. And you say, oh, well, one religion's as good as another. Okay, I want to go to another story on Islam now.
Yeah.
Okay, Islamists have kidnapped hundreds, about 200 girls in Nigeria. Now this is a group, and I'm going to try to pronounce this, and maybe you can see it on my computer, maybe you can.
Boko Haram.
Boko Haram is, I think, the name of the group. And they're just a vicious, brutal group that kills everybody they run across. Well, anyway, they went into a school in Nigeria, and they killed all the boys, and they kidnapped all the girls, and hauled them off. And about 200 girls remain missing. And what are these girls doing while they're missing? Well, they're sex slaves of these men. That's what Islam has done for 1,400 years. I don't know how you can say this is a religion of peace and tolerance. And it's not that these people are violating the premises of Islam. These people are copying the behavior of Muhammad. And Islam teaches that the highest form of human conduct is to emulate Muhammad. Well, if we look at what Muhammad did, he is probably the most evil man that ever lived. And so when you emulate, it is a religion that glorifies evil. I don't know any other way to put it. We need to understand that.
Okay, so let's look at this from another point. Let's look at it from, well, what it seems to me is we want to say in the States that the only Islamic people that act in this way are what we would call extremists. They have misunderstood the Quran, they have misinterpreted the teachings of the Quran, and they've done these horrible acts of violence. They've murdered, and they've raped, and they've pillaged, and they've attacked, and they've done all these horrible things. Well, they just don't understand the Quran properly. They're not reading it correctly.
That's the narrative.
Yeah, because if they read it correctly, they would be seated in a nice chair, and they'd be relaxed, and they'd be meditating on Allah and Muhammad, and then they'd bow to Mecca and pray on the prayer mat, and the world would be a much better place, if we could just all do that. Well, I have a little different spin on it, a little different take on it, and I really think, because I'm a Christian too, Charlie, and what I've noticed about the Christian church, Jesus said, I would rather you be hot or cold, but because you're lukewarm, I'm going to spew you out of my mouth. And I think the literal implication there is of vomiting. It's like, blah, God's just detested by this lukewarm Christianity. And you see that in the book of Revelation. And so I've noticed that there are Christian people that are either fundamentalists, and they really stick as closely to the book as they can. And their life and their witness and their attitude and their actions, their behavior, their word choice, the way they raise their family, it's more in line with the Holy Scriptures. It's more in agreement. It's much closer to the original document. Well, then I've also noticed, it would make sense to me that in the Islamic world, now I'm not a Muslim, and I've never been a Muslim, but it would make sense to me that the human heart, some people in these Islamic countries are kind of lukewarm Muslims. They're like, yeah, I go to the mosque.
That's probably the majority.
And yeah, I bow down to, Mecca and stuff, and, but, it's just good for the kids, I'm not really into it. And that's
kind of like most Christians.
Kind of like some Christians, yeah.
Most Christians in America.
Well, so it would make sense to me that, but in the Islamic world, there are probably people who are very fundamentalistic about their belief systems in the Islamic world. They probably look to the life of Muhammad, and they say, he married a girl who was, help me out here, Charlie.
6 years old.
A 6-year-old girl. He did that. Now this is in the Quran, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a Quranic, if that's even a word, fact. So because I'm a good Muslim, I'm a fundamentalist. I believe the book. I'm with it. I'm doing it. I'm going to copy the master. I'm going to do what he did. Now correct me if I'm wrong here, but then Muhammad also signed a treaty with some caravan traders, and then built up his own army.
He had the army of the city of Medina, and he was at war with his former hometown of Mecca. And so he signed a treaty. Medina and Mecca signed a treaty.
Okay, so the treaty means we're not going to fight anymore. We've decided to...
10-year peace treaty.
We've decided... Okay, so but in the meantime, what does he do? He builds up his military, and then he attacks before the end of the treaty. Is that right?
2 years into the treaty.
Okay, so he's got his... He's lied to his opponent, his enemy, and now he's built up his troops, and now he's going to attack them. And so if I'm going to be... if I want to be a lukewarm Muslim, I'm going to be nice to my enemies. I might be loving to my enemies if I'm a lukewarm Muslim, but if I'm a fundamentalist Muslim, I've got to look to the life of Muhammad as my example. And I've got to say, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to lie to my enemy. And I'm going to tell them, you're my friend. Let's form a treaty. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I'm going to get you. And I'm going to wait till you're weak, and I'm going to attack you. That's what a good Muslim should do.
Well,
right?
and also, if you're a good Muslim, you think, if there's a battle between me and another group of people, we're going to go in, and we're going to, when we won the battle, assuming they win the battle, any men prisoners, we're going to ask them, do you confess that Allah is God and Muhammad his prophet? And if they say, no, I can't confess that, I'm a Christian or a Buddhist or whatever, they're going to cut his head off. Okay? Now, that's what Muhammad did. That's what Muhammad told them to do. So if you're a fundamentalist, that's what you're going to do. And then you're going to take the women and the young boys that are young enough to form and shape and use into what you want, and you're going to make slaves of all of them. You will rape all of the women. Because that's what Muhammad did. And the little girls, And then the little boys you will train up to be Muslim soldiers so they can die in future conquests.
Now that's only if you're a fundamentalist.
Only if you really want to be a good Muslim.
Now, if you're not signing up for all that, but you just want to go with the flow of the culture, you just kind of want to fit in. You don't want to be, you don't want to be. You could be the silent majority, perhaps, in the Islamic world, and
you can go to the mosque and pray, and you can give contributions to Muslim causes that support jihad.
Right.
That's a 1,400-year-old principle. If you're not actively involved in jihad, you can give money to support jihad. And so the lukewarm Muslims do that.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to get people to understand is that when a Christian, a professing Christian, drives a truck in front of the Oklahoma Federal Building and blows it up, he is not representing Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
Jesus Christ never did that.
No.
I mean, he never attacked anyone. He never, money changers, he whipped them, but he didn't mortally wound them. He didn't kill them.
We don't know that he ever struck them.
He just shamed them or exposed their problem and cleaned out the temple. That's I think, perhaps the biggest act of violence we ever see out of the Lord Jesus. However, so when a Christian performs an act of domestic terror or terror, you can't blame that on Jesus. You can't blame that on the Bible. You can't say, all those Christians are that way, because if they are, they're misrepresenting Jesus himself when they do that. When they came to arrest Jesus in the temple, Peter pulls out a sword and strikes
No,
up.
that was on the Mount of... it wasn't in the temple when they arrested him.
No, he was out in the garden.
The Garden of Gethsemane.
And they went, Peter pulls out the sword and he cuts off Malchus's ear, the servant of the high priest. And Jesus says, what are you doing? I'm not leading a rebellion. Well, put your sword away. And he heals them, Yeah. So for any Christian to really take up arms and say, I'm doing this in the name of Jesus is an error, in my opinion. Now, but on the other side of the coin, in the Islamic world, if you see the teacher, who is Muhammad, doing these things, you're wrong if you don't do those things, because that's what he did. So I want to redefine this extremist concept. A Muslim who's an extremist isn't really the Muslim that's going to cause you problems as much as the Muslim who's a fundamentalist. The Muslim that goes by the book.
Well, I don't know really what the difference is.
To me.
I don't know what the difference is between a Muslim extremist and fundamentalist. To me, they're the same thing.
Well, what's a Christian extremist and a Christian fundamentalist?
I'm not so sure they're not the same thing.
Well, to me, a Christian extremist would be someone that would do something off the path of Jesus.
Oh, see, to me, a Christian extremist is a person that does really extreme things like loving his enemy and praying for those who despitefully use him. That's a Christian extremist. And maybe we're just looking at the concepts differently, but
I think Americans need to wake up to the fact that when a Muslim fundamentalist does something, they're not kooky and crazy and wacky. They're just going by the book.
They're following the teachings of their religion.
Now I know that I've never read through the Quran, but
I have.
But then you'll be able to talk about this. The idea is that in the Quran there are all these passages about peace. There are all these passages about goodness and butterflies and all that kind of stuff. But there's also this idea in the doctrine of abrogation.
Absolutely.
Which means that if it came up 1,000 years before Muhammad, like if the prophet Abdul says the sky is black, but then Muhammad comes up and says the sky is red, the sky is now red. Because his teaching is after the other teaching.
Yeah, but it's more important than that to understand the doctrine of abrogation. Okay, there were all these other Muslim prophets before Muhammad. You know, like Abraham, Moses, Elisha, Isaiah, Jesus, John the Baptist. You know, they were all Islamic prophets or Muslim prophets, according to the teachings of Muslim. Now, you know, obviously I don't believe that, but that's what the Muslim teaching is. But when Muhammad came along, all of their teachings were abrogated for a better teaching. But that's not the end of it, okay? The end of it is that anything Muhammad said after something else that Muhammad said abrogates what Muhammad said earlier. So if Muhammad had ever said, love your enemies, which he never said, but if he had said that, and later on he said, cut off your enemy's head, well then the love your enemies has been abrogated.
Yeah.
And also this is important.
Let me ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a case in the modern times when a Muslim person has actually cut off another person's head?
Oh my, every day. Today, Muslims will cut off other people's heads. It's going on. A Muslim kills a non-Muslim on the average of once every 5 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
And you can go on the internet and you can pull up, just type in beheading, and you can probably pull up 5 or 10 videos of that Muslims recorded on their cell phones and put on the internet so people can see the power of Allah.
And they're good Muslims, right?
Oh, they're the good Muslims.
And they're only good because they're
as they're cutting off the Christian missionary's head for doing the unpardonable thing of preaching the gospel, they're screaming Allah Akbar.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's not something that happened back 1,400 years ago. It has happened consistently for 1,400 years. It's going on today. Wake up!
Yeah.
But there was another point I wanted to make, and it just I lost it, but it was really important. Okay, another thing. Muhammad, and this is in the Quran and in the other Islamic writings, okay? And it is that Muhammad himself was deceived by Satan and said some things that he was really under satanic deception. And basically it's whenever he was saying kind things about Christians or Jews, he was under satanic deception. Okay? So even Muslims believe that Muhammad was deceived by Satan
At
certain times. Okay? Now, I don't know where you go with that. But I mean, that's a fundamentalist Muslim teaching. Now, you know, there may be a lot of Muslims that don't know that.
Or don't believe it.
Well, but it's in their writings.
Yeah. It's kind of like pass the law and then we'll read it afterwards.
Yeah. And another thing that's important to understand about Islam is Islam follows what I would call circular logic. And that is, Islam teaches that the holy books of the Christians and Jews were corrupted. And the only true work or revelation from God is the Quran. Well, now how do we know that? Because Muhammad said so. Now, to me, that's circular.
Yeah.
You know, we know that Muhammad's works are true because Muhammad said so. And just contrast that to Jesus. And by the way, Muhammad never